Oh, it is bitterly cold, but Happy New Year to you, Kevin.
All to you too. Of course, Chicago's just a fly speck compared to New York's cold. It was minus 31 2 days ago.
Ugh,
And,
it's miserable.
But it's a dry cold.
Like a dry heat, huh?
Yeah, well, it isn't really a dry cold. It's snowing by the bushel. But you know, one thing that irritates me, and I mean bad, is these jack-offs that leave their dogs outside.
Oh, man.
And I told the neighbor about that, and I think I'm going to get a little faster than just telling him about it. But it's amazing how many people in this little crappy neighborhood here actually leave their dogs out. And, even though this is far south, it's still like 15 tonight.
Yeah.
So, and obviously they're not all Siberian Huskies. So, at any rate, that makes me mad.
Yeah.
But, I'd be jailed if I did what I wanted to do. But I'm not sure. It might be worth it. But I'm actually visiting my business partner and his wife's house. My normal office situation isn't the same, so the dog is taking up all the room here. But now there's an interesting little deal, and I've never mentioned it before, Heidi, but it's at Kevin Cook Media on Twitter.
Okay.
And there's a couple stories at Kevin Cook Media. And there's a couple stories, and one of them I shared was a NASA astronaut, John Glenn. Actually, there's a tape of a recording of his being in awe of UFOs back from 1962. You might already know it.
Yeah, I posted it on Facebook as well because I'm like, why release that now? That's crazy.
I know. I mean, it's a little bit bizarre 55 years on. But
what are they getting us ready for is what I'm wondering.
Well, I think really, like we talked of kind of last week, is that this is what happened with that guy that was the Air Force intelligence agent, is that was essentially de facto closure, if you will. I mean, it didn't come with drums and whistles and Trump saying it or, fireworks, but that was an understated way of disclosure last week.
Right. Yeah. And, people thought the society would implode with such information. Half of them are just like, cool. All right, great. What's next?
Yeah. Well, after
know about it.
Well, see, that's the thing. We've been X-filed up and UFO'd up for so many years that and also many other notable people have mentioned the obvious, availability of UFOs. But not like you say, the story about John Glenn, 55 years on, and they're just now mentioning his, little recording there. That is bizarre.
It is.
I think we hit the disclosure everybody's been yakking about. We've already got it. So
yeah, I just wish they'd be more forthcoming already and just quit with this little dibs and dabs of stuff that's old news. I mean, that was old John Glenn. Come on, they know they've got better stuff now.
Well, of course, but I'm just saying that I'm sure it'll be a gradual thing.
Yeah.
But anyhow, there's another story I've got here. Is a Muslim-controlled no-go zone in Bradford, England, has non-Muslims scared, saying that the government calls them Asians instead of Muslims, which is really the wimpiest thing I've ever heard of. They're no more Asian than I'm Asian, but they don't know what to do about it. And of course, I would know what to do about it, and most Texans would know what to do about it. Or Georgians either, but, I can't say that on the air without seeming extreme. But
we all know you're extreme now.
Well, then I can say it. I know.
Not very Christian.
Oh, no. You have to read the Old Testament. But, I mean, it's all one continuity. But at any rate, that's happening. But I just thought it was remarkable how wimpy and slimy the British are to let their country have these little enclaves where it's a no-go zone. So if you're a British citizen just walking down the road and say you didn't have a hijab on or whatever they call it, they'd start accosting you. In Bradford, England? And this is kind of something out of it makes the UFO seem normal is what I'm saying.
Well, it's not cool to have, that's for sure. But in Israel, the what are they called? The more stricter Jews. I can't Orthodox Jews. If you're driving through the
Jews or
neighborhood,
whatever they're called. Yeah.
Orthodox, if you're driving through their neighborhood on a Saturday, Shabbat, they'll throw rocks at your car. Imagine that.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Not cool.
Well, I mean, there's
any extremeness sense is just. I don't think it's cool. Anything that could cause harm to somebody, that's just ridiculous.
Yes, but Britain is a country with a long, glorious foundation and background. I mean, who's going to let these Johnny-come-lately idiots come in there and tell them you've got to run around a certain manner in Bradford, England, that probably they've had relatives live there for 1,000 years, 2,000 years. I mean,
yeah, it's not good. Not good.
No, there's going to be a remedy to this one of these days, but
now people are getting angry. I mean, anytime somebody tries to push their beliefs onto someone else, it gets ugly. People get angry.
Well,
that's for sure.
I think it needs to get real ugly, but then we'll deal with that on another show. But now, the apparitions of Mary in the Muslim world, like we've talked about before, are pretty widespread.
You mean Jesus?
No, I mean Mary.
Oh, you're talking about the Coptic Church?
Well, not just the one that, from 68 to 70, but there's been some others in Bethlehem, in Lebanon, in Cairo was another one.
Oh.
In 3 separate areas. So, I mean, in other words, it's increasing its frequency, too. So there's a lot of stuff brewing. And
sounds like it.
I don't know. And now this is not, a hot smoking thing, on the level of that. But did you know that Savannah, Georgia, is going to get snow tonight?
Oh, wow.
You got to understand well, I don't know. It's probably not going to be just a heck of a lot. But still, they have a freeze, what's it, cold warning, freeze warning, whatever it's called. Whatever they call it, where Joe and I were just talking about it, where it's dangerous to health, whatever that term they use. Cold warning, basically.
Yeah.
But they're going to have that there, and you got to understand, Jacksonville's only about 80 or 90 miles. I mean, Savannah's only about 80 or 90 miles from Jacksonville, Florida. So.
Well, crazy. And the extreme weather is caused by global warming, and for Trump to say what he did, like, we could sure use some of that global warming now. Everybody's so cold. It's like this.
Well, I'm glad he said that, though. I'm glad he said that, though, because none of the supposed intellectual types have dealt with the issue that the whole solar system is warmed up, which has nothing at all to do with oil, usage or carbon emissions or something like that.
But like I was saying, there was a response to say, these extreme temperatures and extreme weather is a direct cause of a result of the global warming going on. So everything's
how about on Mars and Venus?
I don't know. I hadn't heard that. That's interesting.
Yeah, up in England, and have a country that's been civilized, has a proud tradition and all that, and have these little no-go zones. I mean, it's just weird, man. It's just
that's sad. Well, what do you think about this new uprising in Iran that's going on right now?
Oh, I know. I was going to talk to Perkins about it too, but I think it's fascinating. I'm amazed, actually, in such a totalitarian society, that those people have the guts to do that, and I applaud them for their courage. There have been actually, what they said, and some of the reports, there's been actually deals where they're burning pictures of the Ayatollah Khomeini or whatever his name is.
Well, I have to say, Trump was like, we support them for speaking up against their government and protesting, using their voices, but taking a knee during the NFL games, he doesn't think that's the same amount of freedom. I mean, like, we should not speak up and
Well, I mean, there's a difference between patriotic stuff and not really.
It's a double standard, and it's like he just took a knee. He didn't say anything. He just took a knee, and he's like, that man should be thrown out, and how dare anybody? And, he was so offended. So there's an uproar about that too. It's like,
but he's not the only. He's not the. Hey, yo. He's not the only one that feels that way. The NFL's taking a tremendous financial hit over that.
Yeah, they are. But it's like, freedom of speech. Great. Let it be equal all the way around. But then he hates the media, and it's like, come on, we got to keep This has got to be some kind of regulation on what he judges to be fair and what's not fair. I
Even
don't get
Jimmy
it.
Carter, yeah, whatever. Even Jimmy Carter, who's one of the most mild-mannered presidents we've ever had, even he thinks Trump is being unfairly dealt with in the media, and I do too. I'm not saying he's, the greatest guy you ever want to spend a, weekend with or something, but that's not the point. If you put any of those bozos, if you put any of them bozos under the microscope that he's been under, you'd find flaws. George Bush,
Well, he was
Carter.
the magnifying glass holder over Obama's head during this whole presidency, so it's only fair that Trump gets it.
Nobody's dealt with Obama enough. Now, Obama ought to be making big ones and little ones at some prison up there in Illinois.
But the thing that really gets me, whenever you mention something in particular to Trump, it seems like a lot of people will go and hit a general blanket of, well, look at the entire administration of this, and that. It's like he specifically went down the row and attacked people, and he made his whole political career off from attacking Obama. But when it's done to him, everybody's like, hey, you guys are being too tough on Trump. I'm like, Trump is tough on everybody.
Yes, but the stuff they're coming down on him, for the most part, not all, but for the most part, is trivial. If you microscoped around after George Bush or certainly Clinton, you could find all kinds of skeletons in the closet.
They threw those skeletons all over the place. We've seen them all, but what's fair is fair. I mean, Bush was called an idiot.
You're just trying to find baloney. You're just trying to
Clinton was called a scum bucket for doing what he did. And it's like, he lied about Monica and he got impeached almost for part of the reason.
Yeah, well, yes, but I mean, that's some of the more minor things he did. He's got a body count list. If you remember that John Legato that was on, that retired FBI agent, he said he wasn't at all surprised about their body count. He said it was the Clinton Foundation's nothing but a criminal enterprise to launder money through, and that's all it is. So in other words, for all the breastbeating about poor Trump comes off like a Boy Scout compared to this scumbag.
I don't know.
I agree with that.
I think there's a lot that's surfacing out there with Trump. Hey, how's it going there, Dan?
Dan, she's so worried about if Trump is right next to an axe murderer in this woman's eyes, and all he is might be obnoxious, but that's it.
He keeps putting his foot down his throat. Come on now.
Well, Bill Clinton had something, or Monica had something else in her throat, but that's a whole other story.
Well, I think, what was Trump grabbing all the time? I mean, my God.
Okay.
No one said he's a Boy Scout,
Oh,
right. Let me take a little quick poll between the two of you, because of something I just heard from the dear lady.
Okay.
She said that that Bill Clinton was almost impeached. Is that correct? Is that what you said?
There was an order for it, but it wasn't directly because of Monica. I know it was for other reasons.
Well, he was high crimes and misdemeanor, and he had lied to a grand jury, so he had perjured himself. But that's not my point. Forget about Clinton, forget about Trump, forget about Nixon, forget about Andrew Johnson. Did you or did you not say that he was almost impeached?
I think I did say that. Yes, I did.
He actually was impeached.
They wanted to impeach him. Did they not?
No, he was impeached. The second half of it's the trial. But they never.
I'm telling you, that's a very important point, because I have a piece circulating right now. I don't know which of the 8 blogs that I write for is going to take it, but I'm sure somebody will. That is that the Democratic Party and the leading advocate for the impeachment of Donald Trump, Maxine Waters from California, says impeach 45. I'm asking you a question to the two intellectuals that I'm speaking to on the phone. What percentage of the American people believe that impeachment is removal of the president?
90% would say that.
I didn't catch what you're trying to get at. What was that?
I'm asking a question. What percentage of the American people?
Oh, let me take a poll. Hold on.
I would say, yes, 95% would say that's removal of the president impeaching.
I did a poll. I was back in Columbus, Ohio, for part of the Christmas holidays, where it was very cold. And by the way, there's a huge storm coming up from Florida on Thursday that's going to be the equivalent of a winter hurricane in terms of they're talking about on Thursday a winter storm advisory for Lake City, Florida, and north.
Yeah, no. Who'd ever think it? That's my home sweet home, Lake City. I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's go back to this issue. The Democrats have been talking about the impeachment of Donald Trump. They consistently talk about the word impeachment. Implied in what they're saying to the electorate is that if we impeach Donald Trump, we will remove him from office. As you said, the impeachment process is the House issues a bill of impeachment, which is an indictment. And then there's a trial where the Senate sits as the jury and the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court is the judge in the trial. And I'm saying to you that the Democrats are purposely misleading the American people because they equate impeachment with removal, and it's not.
Right.
It starts the process for evaluation, you're saying.
Yeah, I'm saying
it's like an indictment. It's like an indictment.
Yeah.
A bill of impeachment is an indictment of the President of the United States who has committed high crimes and misdemeanors. And in the trial, if the Senate agrees with the House impeachment
I think that's common sense that people realize that's just the beginning. It doesn't mean he's being thrown out if somebody slaps impeachment.
Well, they don't
impeachment
realize
word
the
out
1,
there.
2, 3 of the process. They don't realize the 1, 2, 3 of the process, Heidi. That's all.
Yeah. Well, I don't know if everybody's a lawyer out there, but yeah. I think that people get it that it's the beginning of something.
I did it in my sister's household in Columbus, Ohio. Granted, it wasn't a large number of people, but 2/3 of the people in the room thought that impeachment was removal.
Oh, I bet you were the life of the party after that.
So my point is that the Democrats are equating that impeachment is removal, and that's not the case.
No.
In fact, there has never been a president of the United States that has been impeached and removed from office. The only people that have been impeached is Andrew Johnson, who was the second vice president of Abraham Lincoln. Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Those are the two that were impeached but were not convicted. And Nixon did not get impeached because he resigned before the House passed the bill of impeachment. So there's never been a president who's been impeached. There's never been a president.
Do you think they're going to be successful, like bringing those charges up with Trump? Do you think they'll be successful with that?
What charges do we have that have been high crimes and misdemeanors?
Well, I know that there's a lot of people that are gathering signatures and that are trying to move the process along and are calling for it, but nothing quite official. But do you think that people will get organized for that?
Heidi, you haven't told me what the high crimes and misdemeanors are.
I'm just asking about the process. Do you think that they'll actually start that?
I don't think that there is any evidence that would support. I mean, when the congressman from Texas tried to issue a call for the impeachment of the president of the United States, and it went to a vote, most of the Democrats in the House voted against it. Now, let me put a little different perspective on this for you. The President of the United States was the principal reason why we got a tax bill at the end of last year. The Democrats, meaning specifically Nancy Pelosi, the minority leader in the House of Representatives, used two words to describe the Republican tax bill: Armageddon and apocalypse. Mm-hmm. Now, within days after the Congress passed the tax bill, AT&T announced that they were going to pay a $1,000 bonus to 200,000 of their employees. Similar offers were done by Comcast to 100,000 of their employees. And other companies like Fifth Third Bank in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Wells Fargo and more have added since then, have indicated that they're changing the compensation for their people. The Congressional Budget Office scored the tax bill that 81% of Americans will get a tax break, and the middle class gets the biggest break. Now, Heidi, if the black community has the lowest unemployment rate that they've had in 17 years, if the unemployment rate is about to go below 4%, if we're creating millions of jobs, who wants to throw him out?
Do you think he really did that single-handedly in less than a year? Or was it something already in motion?
No. But I'll take you back to one of your favorite presidents, Jimmy Carter. Do you think
Trump walks on water to you guys? I swear, this man can do no wrong. It's like, what the hell?
Heidi, let me finish.
Okay, I'm here. I'm listening.
Do you think to answer your question, I'm going to give you two examples. Do you believe when we were under the throes of the leadership of Jimmy Carter, when we had 21% inflation, the President of the United States told us he was not going to turn on the national Christmas tree in order to save energy because we were importing 65% of our energy at that time from the Middle East. He also said to the American people that he believed America's best years were behind it.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you think that when Ronald Reagan was elected President of the United States, that things changed instantaneously? How about the fact that when Ronald Reagan was elected, before he was even sworn in as president, the Iranians decided to release the hostages that they had in Iran. Number two, when George W. Bush and the economy of the world looked like it was going to collapse in September of 2015, when the Democrats had their campaign and they selected their candidate for the 2008 presidential election, Barack Obama won the election based on the idea of hope and change. America.
I don't mean to interrupt, Dan. I don't mean to interrupt, Dan, but we're coming to our bottom of the hour break. Can we just put a pin in that? We'll be right back, and I'd love to talk about the beloved Barack Obama. I didn't mean to interrupt you, Dan, but
somebody made a cool point in the chat room that said, "Is he talking about Carter, Heidi? You weren't voting back then, were you?" No, I wasn't.
Not that you know of. Somebody else could have
in spirit, probably.
Their name and voted for it. Well, the issue wasn't whether or not you voted for him or not. Is
whatever the politics were.
I'm trying to help you understand that it is.
Oh, you're helping me. I'm pretty smart.
Well,
not really.
We can always learn. Every day we can learn something
Kevin.
new.
Sorry to say, I am pretty smart.
Oh, wow. I'm sure you are.
The point is, Heidi was asking the question, did I really believe that Donald Trump could make a change? And I was saying Ronald Reagan took the psychology of the American people and gave them hope, and Barack Obama stood at that podium and said he was for hope and change. And the American people desperately needed somebody to lead them in hope and change because there didn't seem to be much hope in the last 2 years of the George Bush presidency.
Well, the point was, too, though, I asked if you think Trump, in less than a year, changed the entire economy around to the point of where you're saying African Americans have the lowest unemployment rate right now. And you said, yep, single-handedly. I'm like, really? How did he do that? And you're like, and then you went into this. So I'm like, in less than a year, it takes such a long time for anybody's agenda to get going forward. So I'm amazed you think that Trump did it all.
Heidi, let me ask you a question. AT&T, when the tax bill was signed, or when the tax bill was passed by the Congress, AT&T within 2 days said, we're going to give 200,000 employees a $1,000 bonus.
I heard that. That was just to give a little shiny star to Trump to make it seem like it's going to work everywhere. It's not. It's not going to happen everywhere.
Heidi, 200,000 middle-class workers got a $1,000 bonus.
That's pennies compared to the billions they're going to save. That's nothing. $1,000? Do
you really think that 200,000 people getting a $1,000 bonus plus the other ones, the 100,000 at Comcast, and on? Did those decisions take 12 months to make, Heidi?
Who else?
Or were they made in a matter of days? No, were they made?
This is not that widespread though that this is going on. Is it worth the billions that these companies are saving to give a little chump change to?
So you're saying it's just isolated, is what you're saying, Heidi?
I think it's very isolated, and it's like, Trump probably worked that little deal out to make it look good. Who knows? But it's like, I just don't think the trickle down has not worked ever. So why now? They've made billions off from the way things were, and they now are going to save more billions. More billionaires have been made without this little tax break, and now they gave them a bigger tax break. So billionaires are going to get more billionized. That's what it looks like.
So you're saying a polarity in the economics, yes.
I just don't. I don't see that. They made billions. Now they took an even bigger cut in their taxes, and they think they're going to spread it out. They've already got richer. What? I don't get it. I don't see how they think that'll work. I just don't.
Well,
but I'll let you carry on without asking me questions. Go do your thing. I'll listen. Let's
Heidi, just go home. It's not like that. But what it is, though, is I think a fair assessment of Trump's participation is he's been pivotal in getting this tax break. I think that would be a fair analysis. I don't care if you were Nancy Pelosi, you'd have to look at it that way. But
she says it's Armageddon and apocalypse.
Right, and I'm not necessarily in favor of laissez-faire economics either. I'm very conservative in some areas, militarily, things like that. But I'm actually an old union guy. But what I'm saying is, I will have to admit that business-wise, this has been a big boon, and I think, yes, in a roundabout way, it will, even if it's trickled down, it will, yes, trickle down to the middle class, yes. Mm-hmm. But, I'm, like I say, I'm not, 100% laissez-faire, everybody in for, survival of the fittest type, not entirely, But what I'm saying is, yes, I credit Trump with that. And Ronald Reagan, didn't he do similar things? And
exactly.
Business boom.
So did Barack Obama. He gave the American people what they wanted, which was hope and change. He didn't deliver very much on it, but he changed the psychology of the American people and gave them hope and change. And that was his mantra.
I remember that.
He wants to make America great again. And Ronald Reagan took over for Jimmy Carter. He wanted to make America strong. He wanted to defeat the Russians. And all I'm saying, Heidi, is that it is possible, even in a country of 360 million people, that one person can make a change.
Yeah, on that composition,
I just don't think he's changed the economy with his own actions in less than a year.
Well, he hasn't waved the magic wand, Heidi. No, he hasn't. And there's some things in the economy I don't like very much. Like I say, I am a pro-union type in many ways. But, and you got to remember, the Teamsters were big proponents of Richard Nixon at the time. And I think Ronald Reagan too. Yeah. But I'm just saying that I'm not saying everything's been changed for the worse or for the better, no. But what I'm saying is I think I would rather have Trump than that idiot Clinton woman, yes. I mean, Trump may not be the kind of guy you want to, go fishing with all the time, but I mean, some things I do agree with. The populist stances he takes to a large extent, I do agree with. And one of the things I want to highlight with Dan tonight was this thing with this little miserable Korean guy. Well, Dan, I don't know whether you heard in the news, but Heidi was mentioning how Trump was, kind of, cheering on the sideline for the demonstrators in Iran, and I'm glad he is. I mean, I don't care. The hell with the Ayatollah Khomeini. I mean, I just as soon defecate on him as look at him. But I'm just saying that I'm glad Trump is saying rah rah go on demonstrators. I am. Iran would certainly, if the situation was reversed, would do the same thing.
It's cool. I mean, he's been getting some backlash though, because they're like, well, what's so different, for Kaepernick taking a knee during an NFL game? Then you're saying go speak freely, and it's
quit beating us over the head with beating us over the head with Colin Kaepernick. Trump's an large company and not appreciating what the NFL players did. I think it was off color. I do. I think it was unpatriotic. I don't agree with it.
Well, the freedom of speech point is all there. He's telling them to use their freedoms over there in Iran, and taking a knee without saying anything.
Well, the issues are a lot bigger than Iran. I mean, where you got.
Well, I know, but it's for sure. But it's I don't know. It's just Iran's issues are definitely a lot worse than ours.
Well, I think that's really a cheap shot at Trump, because that's like nobody
this
really
in the
cares.
News. I'm just saying this is the uproar right now. So what do you think about that?
Yes, it's in the fake news that always try to twist things around to stick it on Trump.
No, this is the social media people are upset. They're like, hold on, he wants them to speak of their, use their freedoms, but not here. So what do you think about it?
A class of morons on social media, yeah.
It's just the people.
So do you want me to answer the question or not?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay, let's talk about it for just a couple of minutes. We had a president who, for 8 years, told the world that he thought America should lead from behind, and that he also believed that the government should take care of everybody, or as many people as they possibly can. And we had an economy that probably produced less than 2% gross domestic product in the entire year, on an annual basis, in the entire 8 years that he was president. Probably less than that. And so when Trump came down the escalator in the Trump Tower, when he announced he was going to run for president, I was one of the few people. I was doing another radio show at the time, and I happened to be able to watch him come down and listen to his speech before I went on the air. And I said at that time, watch out, because he could win. And the reason I said he could win is that because for a majority of Americans, and I take you back, even though you weren't voting at the time, Heidi, when Jimmy Carter said to the American people, don't put up your Christmas lights, we're going to turn off the national Christmas tree, raise your thermostats or lower your thermostats depending upon the time of year, and that the best years of America were behind us. The depression in the American people was extremely high. And so what happened was, when Ronald Reagan came in and changed things around, he changed the psyche of the American people. But he also changed the relationship of the United States to the rest of the world. And ultimately, he brought down the wall in Germany, and the Soviet Empire collapsed.
Oh, yeah.
What we have now as the situation is that those people in Iran and other parts of the world are seeing what's happening in America. And they're seeing opportunity. They're seeing people getting $1,000 bonus checks, people getting hired, an economy that's growing and vibrant. And they want that. They want that. And America gave the Iranian government $150 billion in order to get the nuclear deal. And part of the things that they're protesting about is, what did you do with the money?
Yeah.
Why didn't we get anything? And so what's happening is that this idea of the elimination of the populist government style, where the central government is the ultimate power, and the movement to the conservative or right, if you would, depending on your perspective, is growing all over the world. And as a result, as America goes, remember, I believe that the business of America is business. And when people get excited about the opportunities in America and corporations make decisions to bring billions of dollars of manufacturing plants into the United States and hiring people, we're the highest employment rate of factory jobs in the last jobs reports than we've had in 14 years. So what I'm saying is that the Iranian people, the students and the middle class, see what's happening in the United States and other parts of the world, and they want a piece of that prosperity, and they're not getting it. And they finally feel empowered because there's somebody in the world who's leading the idea that American can be great again.
Well, I do hope that, when Trump came rolling down that escalator and he had all those people he paid to be in the audience there to cheer him on, I honestly had nothing against the man until he insulted all of Mexico's immigrants here.
Oh, I was over that. I was happy eating popcorn. I was.
Well, you live in Texas.
I was glad he did it. Well, I was just absolutely over the moon that he was not just going to kiss their rear ends every time they stuck them out in front of him.
It wasn't that. He said they're all rapists and murderers. I'm like, what?
There's a heck of a lot of that, Dan. There's a lot of that down here. A lot of rapes and murders on the Mexico.
But not all of them. He generalized, and it was just like, so there's Caucasians and African Americans that do the same thing, but it's. I don't know, but anyways, I had nothing against the man. Then he kept
importing them into the country.
Indigenous
rapists. They're indigenous rapists. I mean, you're not importing them in. I mean, let's bring in a bunch of locusts so they can eat the crops. Well, I mean, come on.
The point I'm just saying, I didn't have anything against the man, and then he threw his foot down his throat, and then the other foot, and then a knuckle, and then I'm like, okay.
I don't think he did in that. I don't think he did in that. I don't think he did in that at all.
That's it. I'm just telling
you. Do you realize how many MS-13 gang members there are in this country now?
Dude, there's so many people who kill people in this country, period. It's just crazy, Dan, people.
You can't even bring up topics here because she just ignored that, what I just said. These
You didn't even let me finish. I was just saying I had nothing against the freaking Trump man until he kept putting his foot down his throat, but you wouldn't let me even say that. You wanted to interrupt it. So there you have it. I just didn't have anything against the man. But when he kept doing that, it's hard to get behind. He hates everything that I am and that I like in the world, for crying out loud. And he grabs women by their junk. And people act like they hear nothing. It's like, what? Are you kidding me? And then he got behind a child molester, an accused child molester. Oh, my God. You cannot imagine what people with ethics look at, those that stand behind Trump. It is really difficult. It is really difficult. I'm like, if Obama muttered he touched a woman inappropriately, he would have been strung up by one of the nooses that Tea Party people carried around. It's terrible. Terrible stuff. I don't get it. I will never understand getting behind Trump.
Let me ask you a question real quick, Heidi. I have to assume.
No questions for me. Just feel free to talk your points. It's all good.
I'm curious as to how you feel about the Mrs. Clinton's position when she was running for president, that she believed in open borders. Anybody
I think borders exist for a reason. I mean, of course, I'm not saying flood every border in the world. That I don't understand. I don't. But I don't understand, generalizing, hating on an entire group of people. I will never, as a Christian woman who really believes in her Christianity and her spirit of that, I don't see hating an entire race of people and generalizing.
It's not hating, Heidi. You don't hate them. You just don't want them to rape and pillage your country.
Them, the entire race of he put a blanket over it, and he knows he did, and everybody does too, because that knows English well. knows that he said they're all rapists. So it's terrible. And the things he says, it's horrible. I can't get behind that. I really can't. I never will be able to. But you guys have your opinion, but I mean, I'm just saying mine. That's all. Feel free. 2 against 1. That's all good.
I just really think that what happened in 2016, I've written a lot of commentaries about what happened in the election. And I think that the American people, enough of the American people in the battleground states who decided the election have decided that no more, that they were not going to have their cities torn apart by gangs and by illegal aliens, and they were not going to have their citizens murdered by illegal aliens as much as they could possibly reduce it. And the Democrats didn't do anything to encourage those people in the flyover states that they were going to do anything positive for the American people. They wanted to expand the borders, put no limitations, let anybody come in who wanted to come in. I've done a number of stories about the border, and I look at it and I say to myself, the Department of Immigration and Naturalization puts out reports at both the Canadian and the southern border, and those people who come into ports all over the country put out a report of the nationalities of people coming into the United States from the borders. What I don't understand, Heidi, is we have people coming in from Syria. We have people coming in from China. We have people coming from Russia and other Middle Eastern countries. They're all coming through the southern border through Mexico.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Does it make sense to allow foreign nationals who are flying all the way from Syria to come into Mexico and then cross the American border free of charge come on in?
I already said we need to have our borders secured. Yes, people should come in legally. Yes, I mean, just like with any country. And there's a reason why we have borders. Yes, I get that. But, I don't understand generalizing a whole race of people. I just don't. I don't think that it's no.
What he was saying. Nonsense. Well, that's
it's not nonsense. It was my only point. So talking about borders, I already said, yes, I think that we should have borders, not open borders. So I'm addressing what was said. And I'm just saying, I don't like generalizing of people. I don't.
Dan, they had a guy on the local radio in Fort Worth, Dallas, that he was the union rep for the Border Patrol Agents Union. And he said, in all candor, they don't know who's coming across there. You could have an alligator with a top hat come over and they wouldn't know it. I mean, in other words, they try to do the best they can with the tools they have to work with, and sometimes they do okay, but for the most part they don't. I mean, they find everything, Dan. Arab rugs with, writing on it. The idea being it's a lot of Arab infiltration. People from Central America, South America. I mean, it's just like a free-for-all across that thing. So I'm glad, Dan, that's one thing I'm absolutely glad that Trump is emphasizing and has emphasized border security and the patrol. And I have talked to ICE people, and they're very much in favor of Trump. Really,
I'm amazed. I'm amazed that the Mexican government does nothing. That they allow all these people to come in from all over the world, come into their country, and then go up and cross the border into the United States.
Mexico is the most corrupt country. You can never. Well, there may be other countries as corrupt, but Mexico is the bottom of the seabed as far as being corrupt. I mean, it's anything goes. It's more. I know a guy who's my ex-brother-in-law, pseudo-brother-in-law that lives in Mexico, and he said it's more dangerous there than it was in Vietnam.
Yikes. Someone in the chat room said, do we need a wall for aliens from outer space as well?
Probably.
No, because they'll be able to. They'll be able to go right through it. I mean,
Deported too, I'm sure.
You know, I had friends that would go to Mexico to go over to Cuba because they don't monitor that either.
No, they don't monitor anything, Heidi. They don't do a thing.
Nope, I sure don't.
Did I understand you, Heidi, to say that Mexicans were a race?
Oh my goodness. You know what? If you want to call it a race, if you want to call it nationals, you know, whatever. But in generalizing Mexicans, period. I know they're an Indian or a native race of beings, Aztec, Mayans. So call them what you will, but you know what I'm speaking of.
But you know when in most of the government census forms, Mexicans declare themselves to be white.
Well, of course. Of course. Well, I mean,
not Mayan,
no,
not Indians.
No.
They classify themselves as
well. There's Spanish input too, of course. You know.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, you know, and nobody's better looking than Salma Hayek. They don't make him any better than her. But of course, that's a personal opinion. But no, I don't think that's the issue. I don't care for a bunch of Canadians trying to maraud the border. You just can't be having that. You just can't.
Well, and I think that we have people in this country who look at things and say, you know, we should have border security. We should have the right to decide who comes into our country legally. And this is the thing that I don't understand, and maybe, Heidi, you could help me figure this out. I don't understand where people who go through the legal process of immigration get bypassed by people who come into this country illegally. Why try and figure out a way to come into this country legally, to get your visas, to get your green cards, and apply for citizenship, as opposed to then favoring those people who come across the border, come across as illegal into the United States?
Well, the whole DACA thing is a different story. I don't know how to even sort that. That's a hard one. I mean, I understand they're stressed. I had a good friend who did not know she was going to go to college and finds out she wasn't brought here legally. She had no idea. Her parents had done.
Well, go to Mexico City and dream down there.
Well, I'm not saying that, you know, one way or the other here. I'm just sharing my friend's story. It's tough. I understand. It's a tough one. But favoritism, no. But you know how many Polish and Italian people are here in Chicago that came over on a temporary stay and they just stayed? There's tons of them. There's so many foreign folks here. It's not Mexican. That's the predominant ones that I see, in all honesty. Yeah,
but not the wholesale population you're talking about here, though.
There's a lot here.
That I'm writing television interviews, and I do some work for China Global Television Network, which is in 117 countries and 70 million viewers.
Good Lord, that's pretty good. Well, okay. So danperkins.guru would be the starting point, and then they could differentiate into various avenues of it. That's good.
Absolutely.
And you got to mention his other cool books that he's got on his site, too, including Why Can't Grammy Remember Me? And that's important. Important book.
The first, Heidi, the first 10 days, I did a campaign after the book came out on Facebook, or first 2 weeks. I've got 25,000 page views and sold 2,100 books.
Wow.
Good.
That's
good.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
That's good. I'm glad you did. And
it's the only one of its kind out there, right?
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, that's very important.
And my other terrorist book came out a week later, and that's a continuation of the previous three, and it's called Ted Baker and Terrorist Gold, and I think it's a terrific book and very exciting and hard to put down. So,
fantastic.
I love having you as a guest, Dan. You're certainly a prolific writer too.
Yeah,
But,
same here. I love giving them a hard time sometimes, though, too.
Well, that's what she's good for. But no, but some interesting stuff happened here today, though, because for the first time, this little weasel Kim Jong-un was acting semi-conciliatory in the last couple of days towards North Korea and trying to say they're going to cozy up to him in some negotiating format and send some athletes to the Olympic Games. What do you make of all that?
Well, first of all, understand that the world has really turned the screws on North Korea through the UN with the support of both Russia and China in the sanctions. We now have sanctions in place that prohibit the importation of crude oil to North Korea. We had a situation last week between Christmas and New Year's where it appeared from surveillance video that the Chinese oil tanker, super tankers, were offloading crude oil to North Korean tankers. However, late last week or this weekend, there were two tankers, Korean tankers, that were interrupted by the South Korean Navy, and so the Chinese tankers were forced to decouple and stop giving crude oil to North Korea. So there's a lot of things going on, and the fact that China and Russia have been part of the unanimous votes for these sanctions against North Korea may be having some effect. Just to give you an example, most people don't really understand the physical size of the country of North Korea. It's about the size of the state of New Jersey. And the gross domestic product of the country of North Korea is equal to the gross domestic product of Reno, Nevada.
Reno.
Whoa.
Reno. That ain't much.
Reno, Nevada.
Yeah.
Chinese account for 93% of the exports from North Korea, but there aren't any exports because nothing's allowed to get out. And so they're running out of money. One of their principal sources of money was not China, but in fact that little country in the Middle East that got $150 billion from Barack Obama. And they're have been cooperating with North Korea in development of nuclear weapons. And so I think that the pressure that the Chinese and the Russians, there's 400,000 troops between Russian and Chinese troops on the northern border of North Korea. They're ostensibly to try and keep people in North Korea, not having them come in and invade China or Russia. Right. They don't want them in their country. And I think that all of these things are beginning to mount up. Some reporter mentioned today that for the first time, Kim had on a gray suit as opposed to a black suit. I can't interpret that means he's become more mellow. It's just that he's beginning to, and his people are suffering even more. And so I wrote a piece because there are a number of people who are talking about we may have to put hundreds of thousands of American troops in Korea. And I wrote a piece again for one of the blogs, and it's in circulation right now on what would not necessarily war, but what would an engagement look like with North Korea? And we need the following. We need B-1 and B-2 bombers, fighter jets off of the aircraft carriers, Tomahawk missiles. And with that, we can create a structure. The Tomahawk missiles can take out the 13,000 cannons on the border along with American fighters off of the aircraft carriers. Tomahawk missiles and American fighters can close down and destroy the coal-fired power plants in North Korea. And the B-1 and B-2 bombers can be used to attack the nuclear installations and missile bases inside of North Korea. And the B-2s are especially attractive because they have the ability to fire a missile and let's say they get a launch code to fire towards target A, and if they're told that there's a missile that's just been launched at target B, while that missile is on its way from that B-2 bomber, the pilot can change the direction and bring that missile in direct contact with something that's coming up out of the ground, on the ground, or something that's on the ground that needs to be destroyed. So we can use all of this firepower that we have without after putting thousands, if tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people on the ground.
There was a rumor about 2 months ago that I think actually did emerge from Trump's administration that the SEAL team was training a hit team to knock off this little bit SOB. Did you ever hear that, or?
Oh, I've heard that, but I one of the things that I've learned about since Mr. Trump became the president-elect and was the nominee of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
When you see an article written in the New York Times or the Washington Post or Chicago Tribune or any of the major newspapers in the United States, and it starts off by talking about an unnamed source is the source for the material, I think you need to take it with a great deal of skepticism because we don't know whether it's true or not. Some people call it fake news. I just think that there have been so many incidents of where people have criticized Mr. Trump for something that he said because a newspaper or a magazine or a television or a radio station made a claim and he called it fake news, and then it was later proven to be exactly fake news. We had one reporter, you might remember, Kevin, about the reporter from ABC News who said that this particular document that was released was in fact the smoking gun to bring down Donald Trump, and they lied about the date, but the stock market dropped 350 points based on that piece of bad reporting. And so, it is part of the persona of a lot of people in the press today, which is highly liberal, that from day one did not like Mr. Trump, didn't want him to be president, and is doing everything they possibly can to get rid of him. And yet what they don't understand is that they've destroyed their reputation and their credibility. I mean, the reputation of the mainstream media in this country is below used car salesmen. I mean, it's atrocious.
But what of this very low approval rating of Trump? I mean, this is kind of proof in the pudding that the people are not happy, not just the media.
Well, I saw a report over the weekend that the year-end favorability report of Donald Trump at the end of his first year was 45%, exactly the same amount, and the same percentage of Barack Obama at the end of his first calendar year.
I have not seen that. With who, though? I have not seen a poll that says that high.
I saw it on Drudge over the weekend.
Everywhere I turn into there, it's the opposite. So I'm shocked to hear anybody has said anything as normal.
Oh, did you see the report where approximately 95% of all the stories reported by the mainstream media were anti-Trump?
I'm not surprised. He's insulted too many people, I guess. I mean, he's really kind of gone down the row and taken a pot shot at everybody. So
yeah, but let me ask you a question. Do you think it's possible that something more than 5% of the activity that he's performed, you probably won't, but 5% of the activities that he's done for the first part of his first term has only been positive? Everything else, 95% of everything else he's done is negative?
You know, I really like to look to the positive side of people and hope that mankind doesn't like to shoot itself in the foot. And I hope he's of that mankind and not a reptilian alien in control and really wants the best for people that are below billionaire level. I really want that to be the truth. But they say he's the most lyingest president. I mean, fact checkers are working overtime. What do we say to that when he just blatantly says whatever comes off the top of his head, and a simple Google can find that it's not the truth? I'm dismayed at politics today, period. I mean, it's sick. I mean, here a baseball game gets shot up, because people are over the top angry. And It shouldn't be that way. I don't want to see anybody get hurt. I don't want people to get insulted. But I want people to be honest about, what their heart is telling them what's going on, what's the truth, and let's just be forward about it and just see eye to eye. I'm so tired of the negativity out there against Trump, against anything. And I just want people to be what they appear to be instead of these lies.
The negativity level is over the top. Even that smarmy little... smarmy little Seth Meyers guy is talking about his little award show. He's hilarious,
though. But there's so much that the tax bill went through. Who got to read it? People are like, please give us time to read it. Nope, just shove it through. But that's good for the people. They're scribbling in the sidelines, the margins. I'm like, come on. Why is there so much, covert stuff going on? And here they give us this.
Has been, Heidi.
Oh, but this is through the roof. It's so ridiculous.
Nah.
Maybe because it's so like, we're getting tweets every day to let us know what's going on, and then we find things are just not what they appear to be. I don't know, but it's so hostile out there, and it's a shame. People need to figure it out.
It's interesting when you talk about the tax bill and not having anybody being able to read it, which is not quite true because the bill passed the House on like a Thursday, and they brought it up for a vote to the Senate the following Tuesday. Then they delayed the vote, and they finally had the final vote. Then they had to go back to the House on Thursday. So there was ample time for congressmen because the bill was only 1,000 pages versus Obamacare, which was 2,500 pages. And Nancy Pelosi said, well, you've got to pass it before we can find out what's in it. And nobody had a chance to read that bill.
Unfortunately, Dan's got to leave at our 15-minute break after 9. So, but everybody needs to see Dan. Go to danperkins.guru and read all the different avenues this man's got going. And
he's a busy man.
Everything else. Yes.
It's a pleasure as always, Dan.
Always.
Happening with their grandparents when they are afflicted with dementia.
Well, I very much like having Dan, but now next week we've got one of your very favorites on, and Megan Barth, and we're going to talk about
what? I was kidding.
We're going to talk about. Actually, she lives in Vegas, and she's done some research into the shooting out there, and evidently, just like the Las Vegas sheriff said, there's some smelly stuff going on here. There was more to it than meets the eye, is what I mean.
Oh, that'll be interesting.
And it almost had to, Heidi. Look at all. This guy was supposed to have fired thousands of rounds, and
right.
Just did frankly, he did what I don't know that a Navy SEAL could have done instead of some accountant. In other words, there was other factors involved in this, and I'm interested to see what, Megan's going to have uncovered. And also, the week after that, the 16th, we've got subject matter that I think I've dealt with, and Coast to Coast is the only shows that ever have, really, is we had many years ago a couple shows with a Joe Bullard who wrote a book on the Coral Castle in Florida, at Homestead, Florida.
Mm-hmm.
And we've got another fellow coming on, McClure, who's going to have a book on the same topic, up-to-date book on it. And there's some really, truly... it's not North Korean war or anything, but just for anomalies, there's no way this guy, little 5'1" Edward Lee Skalnick, I think that was his name, but this little Lithuanian immigrant, without any, what he called bulldozers or modern equipment, moved all those stones. The whole thing makes no sense how he did that. And I won't step on the material for the show, but believe me, it is a real, true, head-scratching mystery. It's right there in Homestead, Florida, just below Miami, and it makes for a good show. And I know we'll have, between the two shows, we've got some really good conspiratorial matters and some genuine head-scratching mysteries coming up on it.
Oh, I got to tell you who I've got coming on my show this Friday. Oh,
who's that?
My goodness. I've got Gary Bates coming on, and he's going to be talking about his new movie that's going to be released in theaters January 11th, and it's called The Alien Intrusion Movie. It's being released in 700 theaters nationwide only for one night. They call it something where they like slam a movie out there, and it's narrated by John Schneider, Dukes of Hazzard, and it's going to be pretty tremendous. So I'm going to have him on talking about his film, and I'm also going to have him on UFO Headline News. I'm trying to wrangle a date to have him be on and talk about some of his experiences, because he's an experiencer as well. So this is going to be. Yeah, it's going to be.
Well, that sounds pretty good. I know. I'm trying to think of what the term is we were talking about, where they flashbang a movie or something like that, or intro it or something. I don't know what they call it, but I know I've heard of it before.
Yes, where they slam it out in 700 theaters nationwide one day, January 11th. I mean,
kind of preview.
I'm going to look for it.
Yeah,
I'm going to look for it myself here in Chicago, see if I could catch it. It sounds like
just like we talked about in the intro of the show. I mean, I think, it sounds like a very undramatic way we've had it, but I think we really have had a long-lost disclosure, effort. I mean, and it figures they do it in kind of an understated way. Mm-hmm. And maybe, like we talked of earlier, maybe that's just a prelude to more sophisticated releases of information, or maybe they just shutting people up by saying, well, we did disclose it. What do you want us to do?
Yeah. They're called Phantom events, just so you know. And it's through AMC theaters, so Phantom events when they do these types of movies. But, the disclosure, it's been interesting.
Well, there is this colonel that I told you I drink coffee with sometimes in Barnes & Noble. I go there to make sales calls, and take a break and drink the coffee. And he and I, of course, he knows I have some military background, and I know a lot of military people. And I've quizzed him on the UFO things, and he's smart-alecked it before. I said, well, how about this? I slammed him both barrels, and he said, well, they're just trying to do the right thing. In other words, I kind of beat him down, is what I'm saying, Heidi, from all this snarky kind of attitude.
Yeah.
He finally said, all right. They're just trying to do the right thing. In other words, he basically admitted in his own understated way that, yes, they are finally being honest with the public in this, which was really, for this guy, for being such a snarky kind of guy, that was a real, because I even brought up to him about Colonel Alexander that we've had on before, about how, he's big at time, he's full bird colonel just like this guy, and this guy worked for the CIA also, this colonel, my colonel, and so did Alexander for 20 years. So basically, this guy has nothing on Alexander. And Alexander said you'd have to be a chuckle-headed idiot not to believe in UFOs.
Well, I'm disappointed in, I don't know, they're like insulting our intelligence. It's like, when deGrasse Tyson came out, the astrophysicist, saying, where they said it's unidentified, so how are we to say what they're disclosing, about this? I'm like, come on, and $22 million out of $22 million out of a billions and billions of dollar budget, that's some small potatoes. I'm like, 22 million, that's all they're telling us, but we know it's more than that because they've been investigating UFOs forever. And if you trust your neighbor who has pointed up to the sky and said, oh my gosh, this thing just landed here, and then I got harassed by the government because of it, come on. We got to take our neighbor's word for it at some point. Well, it's not even
the Men in Black issue was
military harassing people, and it gets old that they are totally insulting people's intelligence. It's old.
I don't know if they've ever really identified who the Men in Black were, but very possible they were just military agents in one form or another.
There's some that are human and some that are not, and my understanding,
I've heard the illusions.
It's coming to be very clear that our government has been dabbling with genetics and making hybrid beings that are under their control. I had, in college, I had a friend whose father was a scientist, and I don't think she was supposed to talk about this, but he used to put different animals together and see if they could walk around with rabbit legs or something. And though it was
you mean try to hybridize creatures?
He was hybridizing, and he would bring some home for her. And she's like, I was a kid, and I was so disturbed because the animal seemed in pain. And I'm like, this has been going on for a very long time. And so they've been experimenting with things. And why would they suddenly stop? I mean, it was quite an innocent conversation talking to her about it. And I'm like, that sounds really gross. She's like, yeah, I don't approve of his work. It's like, okay.
Well, I mean, I've heard different figures, many different figures about what the real black budget is in the government. But I mean, I've heard it going up into the trillions of dollars.
If they could give over 150 billion to Iran for a crazy deal, what wouldn't they spend money on?
No, I mean, some recent allusion to the black budget deal is like, well, okay, when the Pentagon has recently said they've lost $8 trillion, that's basically talking black budget money, okay?
Lost it.
Or I mean, they have lost track of it or something. $8 trillion, that's what the figure I was thinking about recently. That's just been the last couple of weeks. But that $8 trillion would, no doubt, comprise the bulk of black budget money. And $8 trillion is a lot of money to be spending without being accounting for. And it's just hard to say.
That accountant needs to be jailed. I mean, any accountant that would lose money for a company would be jailed.
Well, if you and I, we'd be under federal prison 20 times with a 500-year sentence if you and I did something like that. But I remember really well. It was circa 2000, 2001, something like that, when that Donald Rumsfeld was the Secretary of Defense under Bush, and he said something. Oh yeah, we lost $2 or $3 trillion. I'm not sure they know where it went or something. I mean, just like, I dropped a pack of cigarettes somewhere on the lawn out there. I don't remember what happened to it. But people didn't, jump on him over it. They just said, oh yeah, okay, Donald, that's fine. I mean, golly, Heidi, if you were cut me out, if I did that when I worked for State Farm, they said, the local DA going to pick this guy up soon, or they do it tomorrow? Come on. And it's just nonsense.
Yeah, I hear you.
But I don't know. I don't know how it's going to work out with this Green guy, but it does sound like they might have put the screws on him enough that he's not going to actually pull anything. It does sound like it.
Yeah.
But who knows?
I hear you.
Heidi, I guess we better